Just $770 for Southern Californians? Why, that's the opening number. Plus, what about Asheville? FEMA's new move in the mountains. And what comes next for Pete Hegseth, the political hearing that got personal? That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
I think he's planning to go make a trip himself to Southern California to see the disaster himself, and we will follow the administration's lead on this.
The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, saying today Donald Trump could be headed to California in the coming days, and it is the next administration, he says, that will decide the price tag for federal help for the Golden State. A live look right now, Southern California tonight, as they are now in the midst of another round of high winds. Pictures of California, if we can. Gusts there up to 70 miles per hour, with the two main fires just 17 and 35% contained. Now to that live look at the United States Capitol, where the confirmation hearings for Donald Trump's cabinet picks began today, and it got personal.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman. And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No, but it's for show.
Pete Hegseth up on the Hill today. Republicans coming to his defense as he seeks to run the Department of Defense. Democrats deeming him unfit. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Senator Rand Paul joins us here in a moment on the Hill. Joe Khalil on that fiery exchange up on Capitol Hill. But we begin tonight once again with our Brian Entin live in Southern California this evening. Brian?
Yeah, hey, Blake, we're in Mandeville Canyon right now, where firefighters, they're working so hard out here. You drive through all these neighborhoods. They're totally evacuated. There's no one up here except for the firefighters. And you see they're all staging here, prepping for high winds, prepping for flare-up. So far in this area, we haven't seen any serious winds today, which has been such a relief. But look on this side here, Blake. This is what they're doing. They go around, they wet the driveways, they wet the all the vegetation. This is them actually spraying down some of the fire retardant. But they've been out all day, just preparing. You look ahead here, you can see more fire engines on this side. They were actually pumping water up into the hills here. But the good news is, we heard about these high wind warnings today. We heard 50, 70 miles per hour. We haven't seen that in this area near the Palisades, but things still expected to possibly pick up tonight and into tomorrow morning. Blake?
Our Brian Entin live in Southern California once again. Brian, thank you. Our coverage continues here throughout the hour on the wildfires there in Southern California. But first, over to Capitol Hill now, where the Senate confirmation hearings for President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet nominees kicked off today. Pete Hegseth, Trump's defense secretary nominee, the first to face some tough questions. There have been questions about Hegseth and his fitness for the job, but today he reaffirmed he is, and he says will be the right one to run the Pentagon.
We are not Republicans. We are not Democrats. We are American warriors. Our standards will be high, and they will be equal, not equitable. That's a very different word.
Hegseth also had to fight back against allegations of sexual assault and drinking on the job.
There were multiple instances of accusations against you about drinking on the job.
All anonymous, all false, all refuted by my colleagues who I worked with for 10 years at 6 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Our Joe Khalil was up on Capitol Hill in that hearing today, joins me live. That's just some of what played out there for Pete Hegseth. So the nomination hearing happened. What comes next?
So we expect that Monday he's going to get a vote, full Senate, and that's going to be the show. That's going to be whether or not he actually becomes Secretary of Defense. Look, today, that hearing, it's way up there in terms of how contentious, how personal it got over the last couple of years. What he did, though, he didn't win any Democratic support ahead of Monday's vote. I don't think there are any Democrats now that are going to vote for him that were thinking before. He solidified his position with some Republicans, I think, who might have been on the fence. Yes, the drinking, the sexual misconduct, all of that came up, mismanagement of, allegedly, of the organizations he worked with. But there were Republicans that came out of that hearing that thought he laid out this warrior ethos. He talked about this mission statement, no more DEI, woke ideology stuff. And a lot of Republicans came out thinking that is exactly what they wanted to hear. That's what they needed to hear. And if there were any, at least on the committee, that were on the fence, Joni Ernst being one, I think he sort of got them in his corner. He's in a good position right now.
Joe Kay, up in the Capitol hallway, is with us live tonight. Joe, thank you. So one of the biggest threats before Hegseth or any of the defense secretaries in the upcoming years could be China.
Russia and China are rushing to modernize and build arsenals larger than ours. We need to match threats to capabilities, and the systems we elevate will be tied to whether those capabilities are needed based on the adversaries.
Now consider this. Just 2 days ago, the outgoing FBI Director Christopher Wray called China the defining threat of our generation.
There's another part of the Chinese cyber threat that I think has not gotten the attention publicly that it, I think, desperately deserves, and that is Chinese government's pre-positioning on American civilian critical infrastructure to lie in wait on those networks, to be in a position to wreak havoc and can inflict real-world harm at a time and place of their choosing.
Now, here's what I want to show you. While all that was going on up on Capitol Hill, 3 headlines in today's South China Morning Post as Hegseth was on the Hill. One, saying China will not be defeated by the U.S. Another, touts China's passing the U.S. economy perhaps by 2030. And a third, painting a bleak picture for Taiwan's military. Joining me now is the Republican Senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul. He is the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, joins us live here on the Hill. Senator, thanks for being with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Of course, Pete Hegseth, you went into this hearing supporting him. Anything change your mind?
You know, I first met Pete Hegseth maybe a decade before he was on Fox with concerned veterans. And I knew him and appreciated his work, never saw anything untoward. And what I would say is that I liked him because he was not only a combat veteran, but someone who had a healthy respect for war and for not being eager to put people into combat and thinking of war as the last resort, not the first resort. That's the kind of, I think, rational, reasonable person I want at the Pentagon, not someone eager to put us in so many wars, but really to try to keep us out of war, to keep us strong enough to defeat any enemy, but not to be eager to jump into every conflict around the world.
Senator, you are one up on the Hill who always or often talks about cutting spending and the need to get a hold of spending. When you jumped into the United States Senate, the Pentagon's budget was at around $750 billion. It's now north of $820 billion, expected to go higher. I see you responding there because you know where I'm headed, which is when Pete Hegseth, if he is confirmed and he sits across from the then Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, should he tell him, Mr. President, we need to cut the Pentagon's budget?
Well, hopefully there'll be many voices around the president saying that we cannot spend our way to victory, that, in fact, it endangers our national security to keep going farther into debt. We spend more as a country than the next 10 countries combined. So there's not an absence or a dearth of spending. I'm for auditing the military, yes. So I'm a deficit hawk. I think that the debt, the overwhelming accumulation of debt is a threat to our national security. Yes, we can spend less and have a stronger military. There's a lot of waste in the military. And there's a lot of old-fashioned thinking, fighting the last war and not the next war. We now have drones in the Ukraine-Russia war. We have $400 drones that can take out $2.3 million tanks. The same is going to occur with our ships. The same is going to occur with all the battlefields. So we need to modernize and not just think more of everything is better, but also within the military, we still have the occasional $400 hammer and $300 wrench. What we need is competitive bidding. There's all kinds of reforms we could bring to the military. Look, I think space travel is important and NASA is important, but what Musk brought was competitive contracts. We should do that in the military, too.
I laid out there some of the headlines, Senator, in the South China Morning Post today as all this was playing out in Washington, and it struck me the way that China is being positioned there. Tariffs and trade we always talk about with Donald Trump, but I wonder, Senator, if that's going to be the big story before the next commander-in-chief, or could it be Taiwan and a possible invasion there?
You know, I think no one knows, and everybody wants the United States to be strong enough to respond to any peer competitor like China or Russia, and we should be strong enough to defend ourselves and to deter attacks. But we shouldn't forget that diplomacy is important as well. I want an ambassador to China that talks about more trade. When Janet Yellen and Blinken went to China under Biden, they went over there and they shook their fist and they insulted the Chinese and told them to quit selling dual-use parts to Russia to use in the war. I would do the opposite. I would go to China and say, what is it that we can do to make trade better and to enhance your trade such that maybe in exchange we can get you to agree not to sell dual-use parts to Ukraine? So there needs to be more carrot and stick. We got plenty of stick, but nobody offering carrot. Trade with China as well as trade with the world is good for the American consumer. It's good for prosperity. We all grow richer. Trade is not one-sided. This is where I disagree with Donald Trump. It's not a lose situation with China. Everything we buy from China, we want the product more than we want our cash. That's the way trade works. As long as it's voluntary, trade is good.
I'm looking at the right side of our screen as of course, we continue here on NewsNation, and those listening to us, Senator, on Sirius XM. Continue to keep our eyes there on Southern California. I was reading an op-ed that you wrote on The Hill, thehill.com, back in September of 2017, Senator, and you wrote back then, quote, paying for emergency funds that we should be paying for emergency funds from elsewhere. And your voting record sticks up to that. December 2012, for example, you voted against the Hurricane Sandy bill. In October 2018, you voted against the funding for Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, Maria. There were also wildfires ongoing at the time as well. There's a conversation now, Senator Paul, about with Republicans in this town, and now they're saying, you know what? If there is a massive federal aid package to California, there needs to be cuts. This has been your position for more than a decade now, give or take. If it's still your position today, what do you think needs to be cut?
Well, think about it. Just before Christmas, they got $100 billion in more disaster aid for North Carolina. That's probably $50 billion more than they needed. So there's probably a surplus still in the disaster fund. But if you're going to do another 100 or 200 billion, I absolutely still agree with that. Take it from somewhere else. So, for example, I like to juxtapose money being, let me finish. I like to juxtapose money being sent to Ukraine. So I go to the mountains of Appalachia, whether it's on the North Carolina side or Kentucky side, and I ask people, would you rather the money be sent on fixing your roads and fixing all the storm damage here, or would you rather send it to Ukraine? And I don't find one person in all of Appalachia that wants to send it to Ukraine. So in Washington, the majority still want to send your money to Ukraine. At home, nobody does.
Do you find it hypocritical among your colleagues, Senator, some of those who have voted for this in the past but are now saying, you know what, stipulations or strings should be attached?
You know, maybe. I think it's hypocritical to vote for money for Ukraine and then vote for money for North Carolina and then complain to people like me saying, oh, we never pay for things like this. No, it is. There's a finite amount of money. And so borrowing money is not a good idea. The other thing we should do with natural disasters, because we're declaring a lot more, and I'm not downplaying what's happening in California, it's a tragedy, it's terrible, but as we declare more and more disasters, you have to split the money more between the federal government and the state government. The state governments need a much bigger chunk of the money being used to help people because state governments don't have a Federal Reserve, they don't have a printing press, and by their very nature are more conservative than the federal government. So instead of federal aid after disasters being 75% federal and 25% state, it ought to at the very least be 50-50. That alone would bring some frugality to the way we treat disasters. disasters.
Senator Rand Paul, got to leave it there. Appreciate your time, sir. Thanks for being with us here on the Hill on NewsNation. Hope you come on back.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, live pictures now from inside the White House. President Biden speaking live, announcing 2 new national monuments. This event scheduled to happen in Los Angeles last week, but it was pushed back because of the wildfires. To the White House here for a moment.
Landscape support California's outdoor recreation economy, from biking, hunting, fishing, canoeing, and so much more. This area is also sacred to many tribal nations, who were violently forced to leave their homes. You know, they held ancient ceremonies here. They found sources of reverence and healing here. And they're preserving lands fundamental to who they are and their way of life. Folks, it's important. Today's monument announcements build on another conservation action I took. Last week, I signed 2 directives to protect the entire East Coast, West Coast, and Florida coast and Eastern Gulf, and parts of the Alaskan coast from offshore drilling for natural gas.
So President Biden there live in the White House. Again, a speech that he was expected to give in California last week. And then the unimaginable happened in Southern California. Our coverage continues here on NewsNation as there is now a press conference in the Pacific Palisades. Officials speaking there live.
They still pose a threat. If you are asked to evacuate, please listen to all evacuation orders as if they are a life-saving measure. As has been the case over the last few days, the LAPD is focused on maintaining your safety and the safety of your properties as we move forward. LAPD officers are still performing increased patrols in the areas impacted by the fires, and we ask that for your continued support and cooperation, especially with our officers who are deployed at various checkpoints throughout the evacuation zones. We understand the public's frustration and your desire to see your homes firsthand. Until CAL FIRE tells us that the impacted areas are safe for repopulation, we cannot allow you to return. I am pleased to announce that the LAPD will be partnering with Team Rubicon, which is a non-governmental organization. Volunteers from Team Rubicon will be present and available at our traffic control points through the Palisades fire impacted area to provide and share information to the community members and to the public at large. For the upcoming 24-hour period, LAPD will continue to deploy approximately 500 officers to the impacted areas with the support of the Los Angeles Airport Police, Port Police, and National Guard, who have deployed over 500 soldiers who are assigned to the Palisades incident. We are very grateful for their support. We are supporting the fire area with these badly needed resources. We'll continue to respond to calls throughout the city. I would like to thank our LAPD officers who are working hard on overtime away from their homes and families, going the extra mile to keep Los Angeles safe. We are actively investigating all reports of missing persons and have dedicated resources to these efforts. As of this morning, we have 35 reported missing. 20 of those have been found safe. 2 have been found deceased. 13 remain unaccounted for. However, none are presumed to be deceased, but have yet to be positively identified. Arrests. Total number of arrests in the Palisades related to the Palisades fire incident are 14. 3 are for failure to obey curfews, 1 for impersonating a police officer, 1 for impersonating a firefighter, 2 unauthorized entry into closed emergency area, 1 DUI, 1 vandalism, 1 possession of ammunition and burglary tools, 2 for burglary, 2 for conspiracy to commit burglary. We have 3 noteworthy arrests throughout the outside fire zone, very significant to our efforts as we continue to battle fires that threaten our community. On Sunday night, our North Hollywood officers responded to a call of a possible arson suspect who was using a barbecue lighter to light fires. Officers arrived on scene, and the suspect was arrested for an outstanding felony warrant for arson and booked into Valley Jail section. On Monday, 2 additional suspects related to the fires. The first took place at 5700 block of Van Nuys Boulevard at approximately 1630 hours. Our West Valley officers responded to a radio call of an arson suspect who had ignited nearby brush. Upon the officers' arrival, Los Angeles Fire Department was at scene, extinguished the fire, and directed the officers to the possible suspect, who was taken into custody without incident. That suspect was also booked at Valley Jail section. Looting is not just a crime against property. It also takes away any sense of security from evacuated residents, and it will not be tolerated.
Police there in the Pacific Palisades clearly sending the message that they will not tolerate anything outside of the ordinary as folks there continue to try to pick up their lives, try to figure out what's next, try to figure out how they can get help from the federal government. And as officials there on the ground say they are still in the middle of more winds, potentially up to 70 miles per hour. Our coverage continues here on NewsNation, including why some residents in America's second largest metropolitan area are receiving just $770 right out the gate. What's that all about? Plus, our survivors from Hurricane Helene in North Carolina about to have their housing pulled by FEMA. The congressman who represents Asheville joins us live. And Michelle Obama announces she's skipping out on the inauguration. I'm Blake Berman. Thanks for staying with us here on NewsNation. This is The Hill. We're back and forth. Here to The Hill on NewsNation, firefighters and first responders working around the clock to fight the fires there in Southern California. A live look there in Los Angeles County, and that is basically the scene, block by block, still a week later in many neighborhoods there. The Palisades fire, 17% contained. The Eaton fire, 35% contained. The Hearst fire, almost fully contained. But now there's two new wildfires, north and south of Los Angeles and Ventura and Riverside counties. Our Nancy Liu has been covering the devastation, joins us live. Once again, Nancy, where are you? What are you seeing?
Yeah, we're in Malibu, Blake, because we want to illustrate how the Palisades fire jumped the Pacific Coast Highway and just devastated dozens of homes right next to the ocean here in Malibu, also in Pacific Palisades. This happens to be the home of late actor Ryan O'Neal. You can see that it burned to the ground. And Blake, you mentioned it's been a full week since the fires. Just about an hour ago, we saw a fire crew coming by because these remains are still smoldering. So they had to zap a hot spot in the remains of this home. They are going through the neighborhood to make sure that other hot spots are out as well. Meantime, door-to-door searches are underway. You can see CAL FIRE down the way there. You see them putting a pink tag on the home. That's to indicate that it has been checked. And earlier we saw a FEMA crew coming through to check as well. The governor, Gavin Newsom, has announced that debris removal crews will be moving in soon, and as soon as it's safe, they want to do debris removal as soon as it's safe to do so. But as you know, Blake, we've got another round of Santa Anas coming in tonight. So the threat
Nancy,
of new fires is real because of this smoldering.
Yeah, so what's the priority there? Because you just showed me a house that's burned to the ground, but you say fire crews still can't take their eyes off it. You just told me that Gavin Newsom wants to remove debris. You also just said that more winds are coming in, right? And I'm sure you could give me half a dozen other examples. So how are they prioritizing what's going on there?
We have so many fire assets here in the region now, 15,000 plus fire personnel. We've seen tankers from all over the country, all the 9 western states. They are here. They are pre-positioned. The threat tonight is in Ventura County. I've seen all kinds of fire trucks heading north to be in place, and there's all kinds of preventative measures. I know that a lot of fire retardant went down today to protect communities before anything kicks up. Hopefully not later tonight. Blake?
Our Nancy Liu live there in Malibu there in Southern California. Nancy, thank you. Joining me now is the Democratic Congresswoman from Southern California, Judy Chu. The Eaton wildfire, the one that is 35% contained, that has absolutely devastated communities in that district. Congresswoman Chu represents that part, joins us live. Congresswoman, thanks for being with us. Obviously, just the awful scene back in your hometown. You're in Washington with the start of the new Congress. How is it possible, Congresswoman, we started covering this a week ago. How is it possible that the fire in your hometown still is only a third contained?
I actually felt that we were making good progress because every day now, within the last few days, we have seen an improvement in the containment of this fire. So I believe that if we wake up tomorrow and see the numbers grow even higher, that we have survived this second wind gust that was predicted for today. But of course, I don't know. We shall see when we wake up tomorrow.
We hear all the time, Congresswoman, call your member of Congress, call your member of Congress. And when the phone calls are coming your way, what are you hearing the most?
I am hearing about frustrations with FEMA because they have done what we asked, which is to sign up on the disasterassistance.gov site, and then some of them have gotten denied approvals or non-approvals. And so what we want to say to them is that FEMA does have the resources to help them, and that sometimes they may not have all the insurance information, and so they'll get that message, but to keep on going. And in fact, the better thing would be to call them or to go to the Disaster Resource Center, which opened up just today at Pasadena City College, and then ask what is going on with their application. By the way, the other thing they can do if they go to the Disaster Resource Center is get their documents, because so many people just ran out of the house with only their clothes and lost all their documents, which were then all burned up.
Congresswoman, just after you here in a second, we're going to talk to Chuck Edwards, who represents Asheville. And of course, they on the other side of the country are still dealing with FEMA, and many questions there with FEMA and how much support and help they're getting. Do you have a sense of why these approvals are being denied for your constituents there in Altadena?
I think that there's some kind of conclusion that they reached that it is better to proactively say not approved rather than to say pending. I am actually urging them to change it. I was on with the FEMA administrator just last night, and I think they should change it because, you know, there's nothing worse after your life has been devastated, you're not at your home, you're trying to recover, and then you get a non-approval message in error. That's not right.
All right. I know you got to run, Congresswoman. I can't imagine how busy you are, but we thank you for running to the camera and joining us here tonight on the Hill. Appreciate it. Congresswoman Judy Chu, who represents that area there in Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You got it. All right. It is 6:30 here on the East Coast, 3:30 out west in California. Thank you for being with us tonight. This is The Hill on NewsNation. The confirmation hearings you may not know about. Who's playing hooky for the inauguration, and is time running out, as I just referenced there, for some hurricane victims? Our Kelly Meyer is here with what's happening in and around the Capitol. Hello, Kelly.
Hey there, Blake. Well, we know that Trump's defense secretary pick, Pete Hegseth, he dominated the airwaves today, facing a barrage of tough questions on Capitol Hill. And he's not alone this week. Some notable cabinet nominee hearings are scheduled for tomorrow. Florida Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, Pam Bondi for U.S. Attorney General, and John Radcliffe to lead the CIA. This all happening before Trump's inauguration on Monday. Former First Lady Michelle Obama will not be attending, and no reason was given for her absence. On the flip side, though, tech moguls Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg will be there. In the meantime, thousands in North Carolina are still living in hotels and makeshift shelters due to the destruction caused by Hurricane Helene. And today, the much-needed temporary housing program was set to expire, but last night pushed back until the deadline until January 25th. And that's what's happening on the Hill, Blake.
I thought that was incredibly open, transparent, and honest from a member of Congress, the Congresswoman there who represents Altadena, saying, look, and she's a Democrat.
Yeah.
Democrats are still in charge of this, or at least the Democratic administration.
Yeah.
She's saying, look, FEMA's got some issues right now there in Southern California.
Absolutely.
With her constituents.
And in California, and then as you referenced with North Carolina, them pushing back this deadline, they are facing terrible disasters from east to west, and they are being relied heavily upon for these folks that are losing everything, not only their homes, but everything inside their homes, and they just need somewhere to stay. There are a lot of questions that still need to be answered.
Kelly Meyer, Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, so as firefighters continue to battle the fires there in Southern California, the city of Los Angeles is facing growing scrutiny for its response. Residents across the county are now filing lawsuits. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power being sued, for example, by Pacific Palisades residents over the mismanagement of its water supplies. This includes maintaining the water in a nearby reservoir, which was dry, empty, before the fire started. Joining me now is Brianna Strange. She is a litigator and partner at Strange LLP. Brianna, by the way, was at the forefront of similar lawsuits following the 2018 Woolsey fire. She also led a $4 billion settlement for the deadly Maui wildfires, which devastated that island about 18 months ago. Brianna, thanks for being with us tonight. You obviously have deep and recent experience in this. You, though, correct me if I'm wrong, you think it's not the time right now for folks there in Southern California to be getting involved with litigators like yourself?
I do feel that way. I know it's sort of a controversial position to take. I think that right now people are in crisis, and the only thing that lawyers should be doing is offering to help them understand how this is going to unfold in terms of their recovery. I personally feel that it's inappropriate to start pushing advertisements and lawsuits on people when they don't know where they're going to live. But at the same time, this is the work that I do, and I'm hoping at some point maybe there's a moratorium on attorney advertising for at least a month after.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the Maui Fire's $4 billion settlement, again, you were involved with that case. It's still not paid out, right? And that was 17, 18 months ago. So for the folks in Southern California who are rightfully angry, rightfully upset, rightfully hurt, have a lot of questions, is the case that you're involved with a cautionary tale that any sort of financial assistance, maybe rightfully deserved, could take some time?
In cases of this magnitude, it's not uncommon for payouts to take quite a while relative to, for example, the insurance money that's available. That's why at this point, I think for fire victims, the most important thing is to obtain the insurance that they might have available to them, because that's money that already exists. There's no guarantee in a lawsuit, and there's no guarantee even if you know that you might get paid when you will get paid. So I would rather people right now focus on obtaining all of the relief that they have potentially in front of them. And the lawsuits are important, but I just hope that everyone is able to get what they deserve under their policies or through FEMA or any other resource that is available right now.
Brianna Strange, with the advice there on the legal front, I got to leave it there. Brianna, thanks for being with us tonight here on The Hill. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
So if you were just watching us a few minutes ago, 5-6 minutes ago, you saw me interviewing the Congresswoman who represents parts of Altadena, who basically said, look, there's issues with FEMA. She's hearing stories of residents of her constituents who have issues with FEMA. And there is a big story involving FEMA on the complete opposite side of the country, and that's in Asheville, North Carolina. Some 3,000 people there, residents of Western North Carolina, just learned that FEMA will extend their hotel assistance, their residential assistance, for another week. That deadline was going to come up, and it's now been extended out to January 25th, so really another 11 days or so. Chuck Edwards is the congressman who represents that district, the Asheville area, among the hardest hit by Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Joins us live once again. Congressman, thanks for hooking up with us here. I don't know if you heard your colleague there on the other side of the aisle from California, but clearly there's issues going on right now in Southern California with FEMA. What is it right now where you are in Asheville some 4 months later?
Well, we continue to be frustrated with FEMA, their communication, their sensitivity, quite frankly, to those folks who have lost their homes, who are displaced because of the storm. That is an organization that clearly needs to be overhauled, and I'm anxious to be a part of that after January 20th.
How do you want to overhaul it? What needs to happen?
First of all, we need We need a new director, a new administrator, and we've got to change the culture of FEMA. There's too much government bureaucracy and not nearly enough caring about the folks that they should be tasked to help.
So, Congressman, the first deadline for housing assistance really in hotels, local hotels there, was right after the new year. It got pushed to another 11 days or so, and now pushed again another 11 days. So on the one hand, I think you could say, well, good on FEMA. They're doing their job. They're helping folks. They're giving them the assistance they need. On the other hand, could you say, my gosh, to live 11 days at a time, how can you do that?
Well, it certainly is unfortunate that they're asking folks to plan their lives 11 days at a time. But the reality is they're still giving folks notice inside of 24 hours that they need to move. I got a call from a hotel owner today, a fellow that owns 4 hotels in Asheville, North Carolina. And he's got at least 80 folks in those 4 hotels that have told they have to be out today. And
so what happens? They call the hotel owner, and the owner gives them the bad news and goes door by door. How does that work?
Well, there's an online registration system, and the records that the folks from the hotels are receiving are often inconsistent with the direction that we're getting from FEMA, which really leaves folks in a lurch and not knowing where they're going to be sleeping tonight or the next night.
It is the very real scenario there in Asheville, North Carolina, the western part of the state, as now folks on the complete opposite side of the country in Southern California will be dealing with many of these issues and many of these questions going forward. Congressman Edwards, I talked to you now, I don't know, a handful of times probably in the last handful of months. Thanks for always coming on. We wish you and your community all the best. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
You got it. Still to come here on the Hill. Some tense moments back here in Washington during Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing as he fights to become the next Secretary of Defense. And think about it. The tragedy strikes. You need help. And the government says, here's $770. If you even get that, why? Full panel after the break.
NewsNation Friday. On the eve of the inauguration, Bill O'Reilly gives you exclusive access to President-elect Donald Trump and what lies ahead in the United States of Trump. Leland Vittert hosts a NewsNation special, Friday at 9, 8 Central.
Him on the other side, as you might imagine. So what comes next for possibly the man who could run the Pentagon? Full panel here with me now. Mick Mulvaney, former chief of staff in the Trump administration, NewsNation contributor. Dan Cannon, former battleground states director for both the Biden and Harris campaigns. Aaron Perini is a Republican strategist. And Kirk Bardella, NewsNation contributor, Democratic strategist as well. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. Appreciate it. Hegseth, what happens now?
I think Hegseth is going to be able to easily clear getting the vote out of committee.
Easily.
Yeah, Joni Ernst just went on Simon Conway's radio show in Iowa. It's one of the biggest shows in the state, and said that she plans to vote him out of committee. I think that's enough to get him out of the committee and onto the floor, and I think if he makes it to the floor, he will be the DOD secretary. So I think that Pete Hegseth is on his way to a complete and total nomination.
She was the one to watch along with Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins.
Yes, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins still could vote now. I haven't heard definitively on what they plan to do, and he would still be able to pass. And if Joni's going to vote him out of committee, she'll vote for him on the floor.
It was going to be harder for him to get out of committee than it was to get out of the full floor because of the numbers.
Right.
So that's why Ernst was so important.
So if Pete Hegseth makes it through, let's just work with that assumption. If Pete Hegseth makes it through, what does that say to you about the others that we've been talking about? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, etc.
I still think Kennedy's got the hardest battle, and here's why. Not everybody agrees with me, but here's my thesis. He doesn't have the same connections with the Republican Party that everybody else does, right? It's a marriage. It was a shotgun marriage with Trump. You know, you support me and I'll give you a cabinet position, that type of thing. He doesn't have those long-standing relationships like Pete Hegseth does. And it really does have the chance to sort of devolve into a circus just because of the topics and because Kennedy has been willing to sort of, go toe-to-toe with this and say some outrageous things. So I think Kennedy's, if anybody struggles, it would be RFK.
Where do you think Democrats go from here? Like, for example, there's already support behind Marco Rubio, who obviously has respect inside that building. Where do you think they choose, Dan, to pick their spots on where to support some of these nominees and where to push back?
I think RFK Jr. is interesting, and there's a big coordinated campaign on the Democratic side on health care, always, to protect Obamacare, protect prescription drug reform. I think the efforts they have on vaccines with RFK Jr., there'll be a better, I think, a coordinated attack on RFK Jr. than there was on Hegseth. And I'll just say, like, on the Hegseth thing today, I don't think Democrats did a great job of focusing on stuff that really could have put him at jeopardy. There's an $895 billion budget with 2 million personnel.
That's what I asked Rand Paul.
And they're talking about drinking at a Christmas party 10 years ago.
Yes,
that doesn't
just the Defense Contracting Management Agency is 11,000 people and a $1.4 billion budget. This guy's never managed anything in his life. He's not qualified to be to run a Starbucks, but they're attacking him on things I think that were not helpful today in that.
Did they misplay their hand here, Democrats, if it even matters?
They tremendously did.
How so?
When you go into a hearing, if you're going to go down the personal line of attack and go after character and things that happen in your personal life, you better show up with the goods. You better have new information that solidifies your point, not recycling information that's already in the public domain, that's already been kind of litigated in the media, in the politics of it all, because now you're just throwing character aspersions, and guess what? The voters don't care. The American people don't care. You had a laundry list of character flaws, we'll charitably call them, about Donald Trump, and the voters did not care. Right. They voted him president again. That play has played out so many times. Democrats going all in on that was a huge mistake when there are very legitimate lines of questions that you can ask about his lack of experience, about management, about the Pentagon, about whether he's truly qualified, and they didn't do that.
And I think this is one thing where Democrats did mess up, and I think there were places that I think Pete did what he needed to do, and I think there were spots he could do better, but I'm a communicator, so I'm always going to nitpick in that way. But the people who brought forward the conversation about women in the military, and not only about sexual assault, but about their service, were the women of the Democrat Party that were sitting on that panel, not the men. And so Democrats leaned in to, you're a woman, so you're the only one allowed to talk about this. Instead of making this a holistic issue that they thought that if they wanted to try and sink this nomination, all they did was say, you're a lady, so you can talk about the lady things to the nominee. That's insulting.
But Duckworth, a combat veteran herself.
I'm not disquasking their ability to ask those questions.
She did a great job, not on that point alone, but on the Asian Southeast Nations Alliance.
Which is an economic treaty, not a military one. So I don't think she did.
Fair enough, but he did not answer that question well.
He did not
demonstrate he had the
military treaty that would have been applicable, not the economic.
To this point, I woke up this morning and saw all the stuff going on, the hearing in Washington, doing Washington predictable on both sides. And I'm looking at the South China Morning Post, and they're saying, we're going to overtake the U.S. economically. Taiwan's weak. The speech that Biden gave, we're not going to back down to the U.S., and there are real issues to both of your points that can and should be discussed. Meantime, as the deadly wildfires continue to spread in Los Angeles, the area bracing for another night of strong Santa Ana winds with gusts up to 40 miles per hour. Residents slowly begin to pick up the pieces there. President Biden has announced some immediate federal support for the victims.
We're not waiting until those fires are over to start helping the victims. We're getting them help right now, as you all know. People impacted by these fires are going to receive one-time payment of $770.
Former budget director, former White House chief of staff. I think there's a lot of folks, like I had someone say to me last night, is that real, $770? I was like, yeah, that's real. Why is that the case with a government that has $6.2 trillion in outlays?
Because payments to folks, and again, cash payments are something that conservatives are supposed to like. It's supposed to be the thing that we do because that way you can spend money you want to. So I'm not attacking the fact of cash payments, but generally speaking, this is not what the federal government does. We rebuild stuff. Okay, we don't give you, your house burnt down, we give you $700. That's not how it works. We try to rebuild the roads, rebuild the bridges, try and figure out a way to help you rebuild your house, but we don't typically send you a check. I don't know if we did that Superstorm Sandy. I'm pretty sure we didn't do it at Katrina. I mean, I wasn't around for that, but that's not what we do, and we're not set up to do it. It's really hard to send checks to people.
When you look at $770, though, Zillow, average rent in L.A., $2,820. U.S. Census Bureau, $1,200 in groceries for the average family. That's $4,000. So $770.
But don't you think, Mick, what they're doing in the White House right now, the president's doing this and he wants to do this, is assembling everyone and saying what is possible at this time frame in the waning days with our authority to get out the door. And it doesn't seem like much. I agree with you. $700 is not going to.
This is not a criticism of Biden. This is just. Why it raises the question, though, right? Like, I understand your explanation.
It raises the question, what's the role of the federal government in disaster relief? We are set up to help people rebuild and to clean up and do that type of things. We don't typically send checks to people.
I think that when it comes to being able to help the wildfire victims, they're going to need everything they can get, and $770 just sounds mean right now. It sounds like the government's not doing the work it needs to be doing. If you were told, I'm so sorry, you lost your entire home and you have nothing left, here's $770, what does that cover? Maybe 3 nights in a hotel? And so now these people, what more are they going to get? The bad problem here is that the government isn't doing the job it's supposed to be doing right now, which is beginning to prepare to rebuild, and instead they're sending these small placating checks, which people are going to get mad about.
I got to run, but I'll give you the last word here.
I hope Republicans remember what she just said when they try to attach special things to passing disaster relief for California.
Which I think is a terrible idea and should not be done. Under any circumstances, we don't play games.
And that is one of the battles that we'll be playing out here in the upcoming days. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Other side of the break, how will the Summer Olympics in LA be affected by the fires out west? There are a lot of conversations to be had about that. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. Other side of the break.
Urine away from the body and into a collection canister. It's non-invasive and designed to keep the skin dry and stay in place. We trust it to help her throughout the night, so we're all better rested and can enjoy the things we love together.
Order yours online at purewakeathome.com or call 800-508-6010 today. New external catheters for women and men available for home use. Call 800-508-6010 today.
All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation as the wildfires continue to rage across Los Angeles. There are questions now, thinking all the way out for many years now, about whether the 2025 award season, for example, should proceed as planned. There are
Please no awards.
Even thoughts about the 2028 Summer Olympics, which Los Angeles is slated to host in 3 years. There are concerns, of course, about what the city can handle and, of course, where the needs, the focus, the money, all that should go. You just heard Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joins me live. There was an awesome moment. Los Angeles Rams won the football game, playoff game last night. Awesome moment in the locker room there. Sean McVay, the head coach, was like, there was some expletives, but basically saying how his guys rallied around and how proud it makes the city. There was another interesting moment on the sidelines of an NFL playoff game this weekend, and you've got the author.
Yes, A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles was reading a book on the sidelines, not the playbook.
No.
It was a book which you practice every day.
Which is?
Inner Excellence. It happens every day on television. Jim Murphy, the author of Inner Excellence, is up with this. Look, there's a lot of news going on. We're going to get to all of it. You covered it. But this caught our moment.